Last week on the football show, it was their intention to speak about Hertha Berlin and how they might possibly be on the rise in the Bundesliga, but events interceded. Bayern Munich dropped their first points of the season as we spoke and as we were to set up the piece, and so they were pushed back. But as Bayern Munich's season got even worse in the league last weekend at the hands of Hertha BSC, it's time, I suppose, we spoke about the rising sleeping giants of Berlin football. Joining us on the line to do just that is the journalist and author Uli Hesse. Uli, you're very welcome again to the show. It is one of those stories that through the years has shown signs, perhaps, that Hertha might be taking the next step towards being a what we might call top club, for want of a better term. But there is a seeming sense, given the finishes of the past couple of years in the Bundesliga, given the money that has been invested, and now given the results that are starting to appear on the pitch this season, that things actually might finally be heading in that direction for Hertha.
Yeah, they might, and it would be a major surprise. Because you spoke of a sleeping giant, but I mean, most people would agree that the Hertha were a lot more than just sleeping. It's mainly, it's mainly non-Germans who think of Hertha as a potentially big club. Seeing as they come from the capital, and it's certainly a very unusual situation that a major footballing country like Germany doesn't have really a top club in the capital. But for most,
No, but it is one of those situations whereby a lot of people, when they look around Europe and they see the Madrids who are able to foster two big sides, London and the amount of sides they'd have in the top flight and also competing in European football, Paris now I guess is the same with the rise of PSG, and on to Rome and all the major cities across Europe. When you look at Berlin, and I know that social factors have an issue with this, it's a surprise that it has taken this long, that we haven't had a Berlin champion in Germany since the 1930s. It just seems unusual.
Yes. Well, of course, you're right. It's probably unique, I mean, offhand, I just can't think of any comparable, situation. As I said, Germany's a major footballing country. It's not like... so we should have a top team in the capital. Of course, it's got historic reasons. You have to remember that when the Bundesliga was formed, it was formed relatively late in the 1960s. That was when professional football was fully legalized in Germany, or not fully, because there were salary caps and then caps on transfers. So and Hertha, were playing football in a city that was surrounded by a wall, and then technically speaking, right smack in the middle of what was then enemy territory. So it was very hard for the club to convince, young, entertaining people that they should come to Berlin to play football. So, they got around this through under-the-table payments, and that has, that triggered a long chain of scandals. For many, many decades, Hertha was a byword in German for shady dealings and football scandals.
You can kind of see.
This is a club, Just to give you one example, this is the club where the treasurer was an undertaker, and he hid black money, laundered money, and illegally printed tickets in the coffins, because he knew the police wouldn't be looking there.
Used coffins or unused coffins, I have to ask there.
Unused, I hope.
Good, okay, grand. Yeah, it's a clarification I needed, and I'm not sure why. On that, you can see why, as I mentioned, with Berlin being walled off as it was for so many years, how Hertha might, I suppose, struggle for elbow room. It's kind of a hard thing to reconcile, I guess, for people. When you see Berlin, trouble as it was a hive, I think, artistically for a lot of people. A lot of people migrated there. We kind of think of the Bowies and the U2s of this world to try and make some great art there. The same didn't happen for top-level footballers. It never became a key destination or a marquee destination for them during those years in the same way it would have done artistically for people.
Sure, but you also have to remember that there was a reason why people went there, why it became a centre for artists. And that, what happened first was that young people left the city, in huge numbers. So then everybody thought, what can we do to stop this, migration of young talent? And they issued a number of laws that would attract young people. For instance, we had conscription in Germany, and if you lived in Berlin, you didn't have to go to the army. So a lot of young people went to Berlin for that reason alone, and that's also, and of course that sort of, well, how would you say, that suffocating atmosphere is also sort of invigorating, maybe is that the right word, for young people. So it fostered an atmosphere of, let's party because we don't know if there will be a tomorrow. So that's what attracted all those people. But it was probably not the ideal ground to foster footballing talent. So lots of people left Hertha Berlin, lots of players from Berlin.
In terms of, you mentioned there that a lot of people would have possibly, for one instance, gravitated towards Berlin. How decent or otherwise a job did the club do of, gaining a following in the city, having people love it as a part and a key part of the city in the same way that other football clubs would be in major cities?
Yeah, it's always been a slight problem for Hertha. I mean, they are traditionally seen as the club, in the city. They also had a large loyal following on the other side of the wall. A lot of Easterners considered, Hertha Berlin the Berlin club. But at the same time, their major city rivals are Union Berlin, who are playing in the second division. And a lot of people think that Union are the more, are the cooler, hipper, more groovy club. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons for that is that Union have a strictly defined identity and a home. And Hertha don't really have that. And the main reason for that is that when the Bundesliga came into being, they had to leave their old ground, sort of in the north of the city, and move to a bigger ground. And that's the Olympic Stadium. And it has always been a problem for Hertha, that they're playing in what is not their spiritual home, in the city. And that they're playing in a vast stadium, It has a great atmosphere for cup finals and when it's sold out, but even if there's, for what is for Hertha a decent crowd, but even if, say 40,000 come out, it just doesn't make for a good atmosphere in the stadium.
Why was it in the lead up to 2006, when so many other grounds were being regenerated in Germany, that it was never thought that perhaps Hertha might benefit from being one of those clubs? Like, clearly they were always going to use the Olympiastadion as a ground for the World Cup itself and for the final, as we know. But surely it would have behooved the owners, the people in charge of Hertha, the people surrounding it, to maybe lean on the DFB and kind of ask them, listen, what's the chances of actually getting our own ground here? It would surely benefit us. We've seen the example, I guess, would be in Italy, would be Juventus, whereby they played in the massive Delle Alpi that was huge and soulless and absolutely no use to them whatsoever in terms of an atmosphere. And you now look at them now, they've downscaled into a fantastic facility with about 45,000 people right on top of the pitch. And it just seems like a better experience for the players, for the club and for the fans. It seems like Hertha would have benefited from some kind of project like that in 2003, 2004.
Absolutely, they would have. And they might even have if they had, the Olympic Stadium was, of course, rebuilt for the World Cup. Yeah. But it was not made into a football-only ground, for various reasons. One of them having to do with it's a listed building, And the other main thing is that, Hertha don't own the ground. They just rent it from the city. And that's another thing about Berlin, which some people suffer from the misconception that Berlin, being such a big city, being the capital, and being so, it's one of the hippest places on earth right now. I mean, lots of people come here. That people think it's a rich city, but it is not. It's actually a very, very poor city. So the city just was in no position to say, we're going to build a football-only ground just for one club, and give it to them. And that was always out of the question. One of the former mayors of Berlin, he once quipped that Berlin is poor but sexy, and then that's pretty much how it is. But having said that, Hertha actually they will build their own ground. They right now they've extended the rent with the city for another 5-6 years, I think. They've already announced that after that period they will build their own ground, and now the main question is where. They've even threatened to leave the city, which is probably just gamesmanship, because what they really want to do, what Hertha want to do, is they want to build a smaller football-only ground not far from the Olympic Stadium. So on that area, so that maybe for the really big games they can use the Olympic Stadium and their own ground for the other games.
With that, we're kind of thinking 5-6 years down the line that may happen. I know we're very early into the season in the Bundesliga so far, But the results have been encouraging, and if you have those encouraging results off the back of a few top 10 places and finishes since the return to the top flight in the past couple of years, as I mentioned, there seems to be a gaining sense of optimism around the club. And I mean, when you beat Bayern Munich 2-0 in the Bundesliga at home, like, people are bound to get wrapped up in that a little bit.
Yeah, there was a buzz around the club even before that game.
Okay.
And that was, you know, what Hertha have not been during the last couple of years is, you know, I just said that Berlin is considered as poor but sexy. And Hertha Berlin have never been sexy. That's always been their slight problem. You know, they even hired one of the most famous PR agencies in Germany to come up with a campaign, which sort of backfired because it was aimed towards tourists and out-of-towners and sounded very hip, you know, and had text speak and a lot of English words and that. They changed that during the summer. During the summer, they changed course and decided that if they want to be a big club, they should be a big club for the city first. So now they're targeting lots of smaller clubs in Berlin. You know, they're going to tour the city this year, you know, have training sessions at smaller clubs. And another thing that maybe has held them back is over the last couple of years, they've had a reputation as being very hard to beat, but not very attractive. And a lot of people said that was down to the character, to the manager, you know, Paul Dardai. And they said he was, you know, he pretty much saved them from the brink a couple of seasons ago, but they said he would not be able to take the next step. So Hertha Berlin now playing attacking offensive football this season, that has taken everybody by surprise. And it was a most pleasant surprise. Yeah,
Paul Dardai, as you mentioned there, a mainstay, I guess, of the club as a player and now in the past couple of years as a manager as well. He's got Michael Preetz above him as a director of football, I believe. There seems to be some kind of continuity and some kind of sense, like whereas previously there was kind of big name coaches or young up and coming coaches almost parachuted into the club. There seems to be a sense of continuity now where you've got guys who performed well for the club over a number of years in positions of power, and they have a sense of where the club ought to be rather than where it has been in the past couple of years.
Yes, exactly. These are all people who know the club very well and who know, you know, the club's position in the city. And I think they're on a good course now. They're taking it step by step. And again, well, at the end of the day, you know, what counts is the football. You know, it's not the ad campaigns. It's not the new stadium. It's not who is in charge. It's just what you do on the pitch. And that, as I said, has been a pleasant surprise. But it's not just beating Bayern Munich, but the way they've been playing during the first weeks of the season. That was very encouraging, and that's why there is this buzz around the team at the moment in the city.
Yeah. And while we have you on, Uli, I want to touch on Euro 2024. I think it's a week or so removed from the announcement that Germany had staved off competition from Turkey to seal the event for the European Championships in 2024. How has that announcement been received? And I guess, more to the point, how does that reception differ from, I suppose, the announcement that it got the World Cup in 2006, or for 2006, I should say?
Yeah, a lot of people have forgotten that, but when we were awarded the World Cup in 2006, it came as a total surprise. You know, I still remember that on the day before, you know, the ballot was announced, there was a piece in a national newspaper that said, you know, the poorest guy on the planet right now is Franz Beckenbauer, because he's been touring the globe for years and years and speaking to everybody. And it was all in vain because South Africa are going to win the World Cup, are going to be awarded the World Cup. Very few people doubted that here in Germany. So it came as a total surprise. Nobody expected it. And but it did, of course, trigger one of the great most recent football booms. And I think people hope that it's going to happen again because, you know, football feels a bit flat at the moment in Germany, if that's the right word. You know, there's still the repercussions from the World Cup, which have been very unpleasant, you know, not just on the pitch, but also off the pitch. And there's a general feeling that maybe the Bundesliga can no longer compete with the other top leagues, you know, because we don't have investors and things like that. So I think that a lot of people have hope that would sort of, you know, kickstart a new football boom.
How much of that, not necessarily pessimism, but that kind of downcast outlook on the Bundesliga and how it's performing in and of itself, how much of that is centred around the fact that it's been dominated so much by Bayern, and even Borussia Dortmund's challenge over the last number of years has faltered compared to what it was under the early days of Jurgen Klopp?
Yeah, of course, that's a major reason. Yeah, it's not so, you know, sort of the national team is always, you know, seen as being a symbol for the, you know, for the game. but really, it's the day-to-day business that has become a bit boring, mundane over the last couple of years with Bayern's dominance. Yeah, and this has also triggered, a debate about the 50+1 rule in Germany, about maybe how the status quo is always in Bayern's favor. But then again, as you said, it's still early hours, but the first weeks of the Bundesliga have been really, really good. I don't know if people notice that, but there's lots of really, really good games, lots of goals in both in the first and the second Bundesliga.
Yeah.
There's been an encouraging start to the new season, and I hope it could continue, and we're going to have some more excitement this season.
Yeah, I guess from everybody's point of view, it would kind of benefit for there to be a challenge and to be a club, like we mentioned, like a Hertha, to actually challenge in the upper echelons of the league.
Yeah, for Bayern as well. I mean, they know themselves that they need competition at home. So they're, historically, they've always been in a very strange situation as being, sort of the top dog with no traditional rival.
Mm. We wait with great trepidation to see what happens throughout the course of the next few months, and especially, as I mentioned, to see how Hertha build on this fine start to the season. For now, Uli Hesse, thanks so much for taking time out to speak to us.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.